Understanding the basics of e-scouting for whitetails is often overlooked. Before getting started and trying to find places like where deer like to bed or where they like to travel, it's really important to understand that the basics of reading a map and being able to identify key terrain features. So to get started, contour lines indicate the steepness of the terrain. They connect points that share the same elevation across the landscape. So when they're close together, that means that the area is more steep. And areas that the lines are further apart, that means it may be a little bit more of a gradual terrain. So contour lines also indicate the shape of terrain. So when you think about a roughly concentric circle, those areas are probably showing you a peak or a high spot, and areas between peaks or passes, otherwise known as saddles. Studying a topo map of a familiar area is a great way to learn and be able to actually match the terrain to what you're seeing on the map to what you know it is in person. So to go into the specifics of those terrain features, their terrain features are the same on all maps, regardless of the contour interval, but understand that some areas are going to be bigger and easier to recognize than others. Changing the contour intervals on your map, say from 25 foot down to 10 foot, will help you see those more gradual terrain changes than some of the other places. So, number one, a ridge or a ridge line. It's a sloping line of higher ground that tends to slope down on either side. So deer like to walk these ridges, with the mature bucks typically using some of the less noticeable trails just over the edge of the ridge, allowing them to stay hidden and unnoticeable. A hill is just a point or a smaller area of higher ground with everything around it sloping down. Number three is a saddle. So a saddle is a low point between two higher points of a ridge. Saddles are used for travel from the bottoms to the top of the ridge or over into the next valley. I like to set up on the leeward side of a saddle a lot of times, and the reason for that is leeward meaning where the prevailing wind's going. So if you have a west wind, it'd be on the east side of that saddle, or a north wind, you'd be on the south side for it to be leeward. As mentioned before, bucks like to run the ridges and just over the edge of them rather than going through them. Saddles in a lot of cases are hunter magnets. You'll find tree stands, you'll find trail cameras a lot of times in those saddles, but bucks are able to, one, either bed on a higher point in a saddle, be able to look down in it and be able to detect any danger, and also be able to maneuver on that leeward side and be able to scent check any of those trails, or if there's anything in the saddle, especially when you're thinking of during and in and around the rut, basically. If there is visible hunting pressure in that saddle, look at the map and try to determine where those travel paths are heading. So once you go there in person, that makes it easier, but by using that terrain, and you can see like where, say, like at the X of where a saddle would cross, following that out, maybe it's on a bench that's leading out on this side of the hill or on this side, or a bench that might be lower, 100 foot in elevation lower, or whatever that next bench is down below that. Those are points of interest for me when I would go in and be able to check those out. The benches that would have the thicker cover are the ones that I would pay attention to more so than areas that are wide open. Number four is a spur or a point of a ridge. So that is basically a short sloping line of higher ground with steep drop-offs on each side, and normally forms kind of a V or a U shape off the ridge line. As the spur begins to drop off, it creates a really good spot for bucks to be able to bed because they have 270 degrees that they can see down around them, and also having the prevailing wind coming at their back and the daytime thermals coming up, it's a really good spot for them to feel secure. They typically like to have some sort of cover behind them, which can commonly be, a big oak tree or a down tree, mountain laurel bush, etc. In addition, the mountain thermals make them almost impossible to get to. Like I said, prevailing wind coming here and having those mountain thermals coming up that creates a really good spot for them to be able to bed there. Those old mature bucks know that, and they tend to spend a lot of time on points due to the visible advantage and the wind thermal advantage. Now, in many cases, there'll be does that'll bed up behind the bucks on the flat part of the point. And if you're walking out on a point and you see a bunch of does blow out, you're like, oh, I ran into a doe group. But there might have been a buck that was bedded out past them on that point that you never knew was even there because he was dropped off down over the mountain by that point. So, and I want to say, don't overlook micro points, or bumps as I call them, that jet off the side hills that are still have the characteristics of a point, but they're in a much smaller scale. Those can also create great spots for buck bedding. And I really find that a lot in places where there's a lot of hunting pressure and there might be people that are hunting out on those normal points. It just gives them a little bit more of a security advantage. Number 5 is a draw or a depression that slopes downward, usually with a small stream running through the middle of it. The upper end of the draw is a little bit more gradual and tends to be less steep, creating a travel corridor for the deer to move around. Right where the steep ravine meets a more gradual terrain can be a perfect place to be able to set up with a stand or off the ground above the trail to catch the deer moving. I like to set up above the trail during the rut because I tend to find more midday movement in those locations and want to take advantage of the uphill thermals. But honestly, that's one of those situations where you got to get in there yourself and be able to see where the deer are bedding and kind of look at it yourself, take some milkweed, check the wind. Number 6, I mentioned benches a little bit ago, and they're known of somewhat of a flat spot on the side of a ridge and are commonly used as a travel route for deer rather than on those steep hillsides. If you're looking at a map, you can identify them by where the topographic lines are spread out amongst closer together topo lines above and below them. Bucks will run these benches around that upper third a lot of times to try to catch the smell of a doe and estrus during the rut and also feel more secure than the tops of the ridges. Number 7 are creek bottoms. Creek bottoms that run through larger valleys can be hit or miss when it comes to hunting them. Personally, I love hunting creek bottoms during the rut, but this is only when the valley is wide enough that you can get somewhat of a steady wind. Steep, narrow creek bottoms can make it almost impossible to hunt with swirling winds as they come down. They're narrow at that bottom, and it's really difficult to be able to hunt those particular locations. Bucks will cover miles in these creek bottoms looking for hot does in November, and because they can go through, check those doe trails that are crossing, and cover ground efficiently. If you can find a beaver pond that funnels the deer movement, then those are types of locations that you might want to focus on. Number 8 are thermal hubs. Thermal hubs are where typically 3 or more draws converge at a common point in the bottom. These areas provide an excellent concentration of deer signs such as community scrapes. Running cameras in these areas can tell you what deer are living on the opposing hillsides and mountains. They can be somewhat challenging to be able to hunt because of the swirling winds, again being down in that bottom. But if the bottom is wide enough, you can set up right on the creek bank and you might be able to get away with it. I prefer calm, cold mornings when it comes to hunting those creek bottoms and those thermal hubs because you can rely on that thermal pull with the water nearby. Check these areas out and just bring milkweed to be able to check the wind. If it's swirling, look at the points that are leading down to the thermal hub. The deer most likely are bedding on those points, and you can still hunt the advantages of the thermal hub without being down in the bottom of it. The last one, number 9, is a topo hub. Topo hubs are areas where 3 or more ridges converge at a common point. So think of these, they're pretty easy to identify on the map. Think about it, the spokes of a wheel. So you have the top of the hill or the ridge, and the spokes and these other ridges are coming out of it, where at least 3 or more ridges are converging at that common point. These places will put you in the center of several travel routes, making them focal points during the rut. When hunting the rugged Appalachian Mountains of southern West Virginia, this proved to be one of the most effective natural funnels for big bucks cruising for does. In another video, I'm going to cover the vegetation features that you can find on a map and your e-scouting to hopefully be able to help you find your next whitetail hotspot.